Hello, and welcome to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that quietly draw you deeper into the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, settle in, let your body relax into stillness, and allow the outside world to fade into silence. Tonight, something lingers in the dark, waiting for you. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself drift into the depths of Umbral Dread. Story 1. I don't really post online, and I'm not even sure why I'm writing this now. I guess I'm hoping that if I put it into words, it will sound less strange. Or maybe someone will tell me there's a normal explanation, and I can finally stop replaying it in my head. I've tried to brush it off as nerves. I've blamed it on being tired, on the way late nights mess with your memory, on the adrenaline crash after performing. But the longer I sit with it, the harder it gets to pretend it was nothing. I'm a drag performer. I'm not famous. I'm not touring. I'm not on TV. I work local clubs, small stages, places with bad lighting and sticky floors, where the mic pops if you breathe too close and the sound guy looks like he's been mad since 2009. You learn to make it work. You learn to smile even when the music cuts out for half a second and your heel catches on a strip of tape. You learn how to read a crowd fast, how to save a number if something goes wrong. It's fun, it's stressful, it's loud, it's exhausting, and it's the only time I ever feel fully like myself. Last month, I got booked at a place called the Velvet Haze. If you're in the scene around here, you know that name. It's one of those clubs that's been around forever. People talk about it like it's a legend. Not always in a good way, more like a test, a rite of passage. The kind of venue where you either come out stronger or you swear you'll never go back. People say the crowd there will eat you alive if you look uncertain for even a second. People also say the building has history, and they say history in that way that really means something darker. It's been open since the 70s, and you can feel that the moment you step inside, like the walls have soaked up decades of smoke and sweat and loud music. The front of the club was exactly what I expected. Dim lights, heavy curtains, a bar that looked worn down at the edges, and a stage that felt a little too small for the amount of confidence you're expected to have on it. Even before my set, I could hear the crowd through the walls like the whole place was humming. The air smelled like beer and cheap perfume and something dusty underneath it all. I told myself that was normal. Old clubs smell like old clubs. They always have. Backstage was worse. Calling it backstage is being generous. It was more like a basement storage room someone turned into a dressing area and then forgot to improve. The stairs down were narrow, and the walls were painted a color that might have been white once. There were mirrors bolted to the wall at weird heights, cracked in the corners like spider webs. Someone had strung up cheap fairy lights, and they flickered whenever someone walked too hard across the floor above, like the electricity was nervous. The counters were stained with layers of makeup that no one could fully scrub off. There were empty lash boxes in corners. There were bobby pins and broken combs and half-used hairspray cans like leftovers from 100 different nights. What got me most were the wigs. Foam heads lined up on a shelf, each one with a wig perched on top like a person frozen mid-thought. Some looked fresh and styled, but others looked old, dull and frizzy, like they had been sitting there for years. A couple had curls set in a way you don't really see anymore, unless someone is doing it as a throwback. Seeing them made me feel like I was standing in a closet full of other people's lives, their old faces and old names, their old routines. I remember thinking for a second that it felt less like a dressing room and more like a place where the past hadn't finished leaving. I was already on edge. I was trying to focus on my makeup, on the small steps I know by heart, because that's how you stay calm. Primer, foundation, powder, brows, eyes, liner. The familiar process is like a rope you can hold on to. I was doing my liner when I noticed movement in the mirror that didn't match mine. I looked up, expecting one of the other performers to have come in. Instead, there was someone sitting on the counter a few feet away like she'd always been there, and I had just failed to notice. She was smoking. That alone should have set off alarms. You're not supposed to smoke down there. There are signs, even if they're old and half peeled off. Also, the room was small. Smoke would have been obvious. And yet the air around her didn't look hazy. I didn't see a cloud. I just saw the cigarette between her fingers and the slow, calm way she held it. Like rules didn't apply to her. Her posture was relaxed, one leg crossed over the other. She looked like she belonged there in a way I didn't. Her style was what people call old school, but not in a costume way. It was natural on her. Big auburn hair, teased and shaped like it had been done with care and experience. Eyeliner so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. Lips painted a deep color that didn't seem trendy, just classic. Her dress was covered in rhinestones that caught the light every time she shifted. And even in that ugly basement lighting, she somehow looked polished. She wasn't young exactly, but she wasn't ancient either. She had that hard-to-place age that some performers get, where stage presence makes you timeless. She looked at me through the mirror first, then turned her head like she was giving me the courtesy of a proper introduction. Her eyes were bright, almost amused. "You knew?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. It had a smoothness to it, like she was used to rooms listening when she spoke. I blinked, then nodded. "Yeah, first time here." She smiled like that confirmed something. A small laugh left her, not mean, just knowing. "You've got the twitch," she said. "First time at the Haze always shows." I didn't even realize I was doing anything until she said it. My knee was bouncing. My hands were moving too fast. The kind of nerves that make your body betray you even when you're trying to act calm. I forced myself to still my hands and tried to laugh it off. "Is it that obvious?" I said. "Sweetheart," she replied, and the way she said it didn't feel fake or patronizing. It felt familiar, like she had called a lot of people that over the years. "It's always obvious." I should have asked who she was. I should have wondered why I hadn't seen her upstairs, why she wasn't on the list, why no one mentioned another performer. But I didn't. That's one of the things that bothers me now. In the moment, it didn't feel strange. It felt like talking to someone I already knew, like she was a part of the building itself, like she'd always been in that room and always would be. We talked while I got ready. Not deep talk. The normal kind of conversation you have backstage when you're trying not to panic. She asked how long I'd been performing. I told her a few years, mostly local, still building a name. She nodded like she'd heard that story 1,000 times. She asked what I was doing for my number. I told her the song, the vibe, the little jokes I was planning to throw in. She listened, really listened, not like someone politely waiting for their turn to speak. Once or twice she made a small suggestion, like a quiet tip you'd give someone if you wanted them to do well without making them feel small. The more we talked, the calmer I got. My hands steadied. My breathing slowed down. The basement didn't feel so tight. It was like her presence made the space less heavy. At one point, I admitted, softly, that I was nervous. I didn't mean to say it out loud. It just slipped out. The way truth does when you feel safe for a second. She leaned forward a little, cigarette still in hand, and her smile shifted into something sharper, not cruel, just intense, like she was letting me in on a secret. The trick, she said, is pretending you've already died. I laughed, because what else do you do with a line like that? It sounded like something an older queen would say to be dramatic, like she was trying to scare me or inspire me in a weird, theatrical way. I expected her to wink or to follow it up with a joke, but she didn't. She held my eyes in the mirror. For a second, the cracked glass made her face look split into pieces, and the flickering lights made shadows move across her cheekbones. If you're already dead, she continued, calm as anything, then what are they going to do to you? Boo you? Laugh? Walk out? You can't hurt a ghost. Nothing scares you after that. Something cold crawled across my arms. I told myself it was just the basement. Old buildings are colder underground. I forced another laugh, tried to keep it light. That's one way to think about it, I said. It's the only way that matters, she replied. And then her expression softened like the moment had passed. Like she hadn't just said something that landed in my chest like a stone. Not long after that, someone called my name from the stairs. "You're up in 5, they shouted, and it snapped the room back into reality. I started gathering my things, checking my wig, smoothing the front of my dress, making sure my lashes were stuck down. I looked up to say something to her, maybe to thank her for talking me down. She was watching me, still perched on the counter like a queen on a throne. "Go on," she said almost gently. "Show them." I went upstairs, and from that point on, the night felt like a blur. The lights hit me hard. The music was louder than I expected. The crowd was loud too, but not in a hostile way. They were excited, restless, ready to have a good time. I remember stepping onto the stage and feeling like I might float out of my body. Then I heard her words in my head, clear as if she was right behind me. "Pretend you've already died." It was a ridiculous thought, but it did something to me. It made me stop trying to protect myself. It made me stop bracing for impact. I performed like I had nothing to lose. I took risks I normally wouldn't. I held eye contact longer. I played with the crowd. I let myself be bigger, sharper, brighter. The nerves didn't vanish, but they stopped controlling me. People cheered. Someone tossed a bill that hit the stage and slid near my foot. I remember laughing at something I said into the mic, and the laugh sounded real, not forced. I remember the heat of the lights and the taste of lipstick when I licked my teeth. I remember the rush when the song ended and the applause hit like a wave. But the details after that are fuzzy, like my brain smeared them on purpose. When I came back downstairs, the basement felt emptier. The string lights flickered the same way, but the room seemed colder, quieter, like someone had turned the volume down on reality. I tossed my wig stand on the counter, grabbed a towel, and reached for my water bottle. That's when I realized she wasn't there. At first, I didn't think much of it. Performers come and go. She could have gone upstairs, stepped outside, gone to the bathroom, whatever. Still, I found myself looking toward the corner where she had been sitting, like I expected her to be there smoking, watching, smiling. I asked one of the other performers, casually, like it didn't matter, "Hey, do you know where the other queen went? The one with the auburn hair?" They looked at me like I'd asked something in a different language. "What other queen?" they said. I tried again describing her. "The one who was down here earlier. Rhinestone dress, old school vibe. She was smoking." The performer's face stayed blank. Then they frowned, like they were trying to be polite but couldn't find anything to match what I was saying. "It was just us," they said. "There were 4 of us booked tonight, you, me, and the other 2. Nobody else." I felt my smile freeze. My stomach dropped in a slow, heavy way. "No, she was right here," I said, too quickly. "I talked to her. Like a lot." They shrugged uneasy. "Maybe you saw someone from staff, but nobody smokes down here. Not anymore. Not anymore." The words snagged on something in my mind, but I didn't understand why yet. After the show, I should have left. I was tired, and the smart thing would have been to go home, wash off my makeup, sleep, move on. Instead, I stayed. I can't even explain it properly. I told myself I'd forgotten something. I checked my bag twice, even though I knew everything was there. I walked up the stairs, then back down. I wandered like I was waiting for someone to appear and prove I hadn't imagined her. There was a hallway behind the main room that I hadn't paid attention to earlier. It was narrow, lined with framed photos. The frames were old, some of them crooked, some of them dusty. The pictures were of performers from different years, posed on stage or in studio shots, hair teased high, lashes heavy, smiles wide. Under each photo there was a name and a date, sometimes more than one date. I assumed it was a wall of fame type thing, a way to show the club's history. I walked slowly, looking at the faces. Some of the photos were in color, some were faded, some were black and white. The further back I went, the older they got. The clothes changed, the makeup changed. The hairstyles got bigger and more dramatic in that unmistakable vintage way. I was about halfway down the hallway when I saw her. Same auburn hair, same face, same sharp eyeliner, same rhinestone dress. For a moment, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. It felt like looking at a photo of someone you just met and suddenly realizing they've been dead for years. It didn't fit. It made the air in the hallway feel thin. I leaned closer to the frame, my heart beating hard enough that I could hear it in my ears. The name under the photo was written in neat letters. Marla Rose. Below that, smaller, was a date. Not a performance date. Not featured this year or club favorite. It was a death date. 1975. I actually pulled out my phone and opened the calendar like that would help. Like maybe I'd misread the numbers or my brain had swapped them around. But it didn't change. 1975 was still 1975. almost 50 years ago, long before I was born, long before any of the performers I know were born. My mouth went dry, my hands started to shake. I don't even remember leaving properly. I don't remember me saying goodbye to anyone or grabbing my coat. I just remember being outside in the alley behind the club, breathing in cold air like I'd been underwater. The alley smelled like damp concrete and trash, the normal ugly smell of a back street. But layered over it was something else, faint and powdery, like old perfume. That's when I realized something that made me feel sick. This was the same alley I'd been in earlier before I went downstairs. I remembered standing out here trying to calm myself, listening to the muffled bass through the wall. And I remembered seeing her, standing near the back door, smoking, like she owned the night. I remembered the way the cigarette glowed when she breathed in. I remembered the way she angled her face toward me, like she knew I'd come out eventually. At the time, I'd assumed she was just another performer taking a pre-show smoke break. Now I was standing in the same spot, staring at the same door, and all I could think was, if she died here, why was she still here? I didn't go back to the Velvet Haze for a while. I tried to avoid thinking about it. I told myself it was a weird coincidence, that maybe the photo looked like her, that maybe my brain had filled in details because I was tired. I told myself it was possible that someone else had been in the basement and I'd just gotten confused about who they were. I told myself a lot of things, but the memory wouldn't settle. It stayed sharp in a way normal memories don't, like my mind kept holding it up to the light and turning it, unable to accept it. A few days later, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went back during the day and asked the owner about Marla Rose. I tried to act casual, like I was just interested in the club's history. Like I wasn't standing there with a tight throat and sweaty palms, waiting to hear something that would either fix everything or break it open wider. The owner was older, the kind of man who looks like he spent most of his life in dark rooms. When I said her name, I watched his face change. Not shock, exactly. More like he'd been yanked back into a memory he didn't like visiting. He got quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slow. "Yeah," he said. "Marla." He didn't smile when he said it. His eyes went distant. "She used to perform here all the time," he added. "One of the best we ever had." My skin prickled. "What happened to her?" I asked. He exhaled through his nose like he didn't want to answer. "She died after a show," he said, and his voice dropped a little. In the alley, I felt the room tilt. I opened my mouth, but before I could ask for more, he shook his head, almost like a warning. "Don't go digging," he said. "It was a long time ago." "But," I started. He cut me off, still calm but firmer now. "They said someone was waiting for her," he continued. "Someone she knew, or someone she thought she knew. She went out back, and that was it. They never found out who it was for sure. Different stories, different rumors. Nothing that ever stuck." I stood there trying to breathe. My brain kept flashing back to her face in the mirror. Her voice, the way she'd called me sweetheart. The way she'd told me the trick was pretending I'd already died. I left without pushing him further. I didn't thank him. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out into daylight and felt like I'd stepped out of a dream, except the dream wouldn't fade. That should have been the end of it. A creepy story, a strange night. Something I'd tell my friends after a few drinks. something we'd laugh about while still secretly feeling unsettled, except it didn't end. I started getting booked there again. At first I thought it was a normal rebooking, like maybe I'd done well and they wanted me back. That happens. But the messages were weird. They weren't the usual, "Are you free on this date?" or "Can you do this slot?" They were more like confirmations for a schedule I never agreed to. Same night of the week, same time slot. Like I had already said yes and just forgotten. Like my calendar belonged to someone else now. I didn't even give them my availability. The first message I ignored. The second one made me angry. I almost replied asking what the hell they were talking about. I didn't. I told myself it was a mistake. I told myself they had confused me with another performer. Then something else started happening. Small things at first. Things that were easy to explain away if you didn't look too closely. A couple of times when I was getting ready at completely different venues, I caught the smell of a very strong, powdery perfume out of nowhere. It wasn't the usual sweet body spray people wear. It was old-fashioned, like something from a different decade. It made me think of vintage makeup compacts and thrift store coats of dressing tables that have been used by too many hands. The first time I smelled it, I froze with a makeup brush in my hand and scanned the room, expecting to see someone new. But nobody was there who wasn't already there. Nobody reacted like they smelled it. And then, after a minute, it was gone. I tried to laugh it off. Old buildings have weird smells. Someone could have walked by in a coat soaked with perfume. It could have been anything. Except it kept happening. Always when I was half ready, half in my own head. Always when the nerves started creeping up. Always when I was alone for just a second. Like whatever it was, waited for quiet moments. And every time it happened, I heard her voice in my mind, smooth and certain. "You can't hurt a ghost." Last night it happened again, stronger than ever. I was at a venue across town, nowhere near the Velvet Haze. The dressing room was cleaner, newer, with bright lights and a decent mirror. I was halfway through my eyeshadow when the smell hit so hard, I actually turned my head, sure someone had opened a bottle nearby. My stomach clenched. My eyes watered a little. It was that same powdery perfume, thick and dry and somehow intimate, like it belonged on skin. I stood up and checked the hallway. Nothing. I came back in and tried to keep going. My hands weren't steady anymore. After the show, when I got home, I emptied my bag the way I always do. Wig cap, lashes, makeup wipes, tights, a crushed receipt, a hair clip I don't remember owning, normal mess. Then my fingers closed around something cylindrical. A cigarette. For a second I just stared at it, not understanding what it was doing there. I don't smoke. I never have. None of my friends had borrowed my bag. I hadn't been near anyone smoking backstage, and yet it was sitting at the bottom like it had been placed there gently, like a little gift. I picked it up with 2 fingers. The paper looked slightly aged, not brand new. The filter already had lipstick on it. Not my shade, not even close. I dropped it like it burned me and then immediately hated myself for doing that because I didn't want to touch it again, but I also couldn't stop staring at it on the floor. It felt like proof of something I didn't want to be real. Now I keep thinking about that night at the Velvet Haze. I keep thinking about her in the mirror, the cracked glass splitting her face in a way that made her look like more than one person. I keep thinking about the wall of photos and the name under hers, and the year 1975 sitting there like a closed door. I keep thinking about the alley behind the club and how I didn't feel alone out there even when I was. Mostly, I keep thinking about what she said, about pretending you've already died. At first, it sounded like a dramatic line meant to calm stage fright. Now it feels like something else, like advice with a sharper edge, like a warning, like an invitation. I got another message today asking me to perform at the Velvet Haze next weekend. Same night, same time slot. The wording is polite, almost cheerful, like this is normal, and I'm the weird one for hesitating. I haven't replied yet. My finger keeps hovering over the screen, and every time I think I'm ready to say no, I smell that faint perfume in my imagination, and my stomach flips. I don't know what will happen if I go back. I don't know what will happen if I don't. Part of me wants to prove to myself that I'm in control, that I'm not being pushed around by a dead woman's ghost story and an old club's bad energy. Another part of me keeps picturing the alley behind the club and the owner's voice when he said someone was waiting for her. And I can't stop thinking about the cigarette in my bag with lipstick that isn't mine. So tell me honestly, because I don't trust my own instincts anymore. Do I go back? Story 2. I found this tape out in the woods, and I honestly think it would have been better if I'd never touched it. Even now, sitting at home with normal lights on and normal sounds around me, it still feels like I dragged something out of the trees that was supposed to stay there. I was hiking for a few days, the kind of trip where you're far enough away from towns that the quiet starts to feel heavy. The trail was decent at first, just dirt packed down by boots, with the usual roots and rocks that make you watch your step. But later on it narrowed, and in some spots it felt like the forest was trying to close up behind you. Branches leaned into the path. Thorny bushes grabbed at my sleeves. The air smelled wet and green, like old leaves and moss. At one point, we took a small detour off the main trail to set up camp. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a spot that looked flatter and a little more sheltered from wind. But to get there, we had to push through this thick mess of branches and brush. It looked like somebody had piled it up on purpose, like a wall made out of sticks and dead leaves. We started clearing some of it away, not thinking much of it, just trying to make room for tents. That's when I saw it. It was lying under the pile, half covered in damp leaves and dirt. At first I thought it was a piece of plastic trash, like a broken container or something someone dropped years ago. Then I picked it up and felt the shape in my hand. It wasn't random plastic. It was a VHS tape. It didn't make sense. Who carries a VHS tape into the woods? Who brings one deep enough off the trail that you'd have to fight your way through branches to find it? And the way it was placed bothered me. It wasn't sitting on top where it could fall there by accident. It was buried underneath, like it had been hidden. I should have left it. I should have tossed it back under the branches and acted like I never saw it. Instead, I did the thing everyone does in horror stories. I got curious. I wiped it off on my pant leg and looked it over. The plastic shell was scratched and a little cracked, like it had been stepped on or thrown. One corner looked slightly smashed in. It had that old smell, too, like dusty cardboard and basement air. Somebody had taped a small paper label to it. Written on the label, in simple letters, were 2 words, "For Mom." That was it. No date, no name, no warning, just "For Mom." I stood there for a minute, turning it over in my hand, trying to make up a normal explanation. Maybe a kid had dropped it years ago. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe it was part of some weird geocache thing and I just didn't understand the rules. But none of those ideas sat right. The tape looked too deliberately placed, too intentionally tucked away. Still, I put it in my bag. I told myself I'd check it later, that it was just a strange piece of junk, that it couldn't hurt anything to satisfy my curiosity. Then I went back to camping like nothing happened. For the rest of the trip, though, I kept thinking about it. Every time I reached into my bag for something, my fingers brushed the hard plastic shape and I'd remember the label. For Mom. Like it was meant for someone, and it ended up with me by mistake. I finished the hike, drove home, unpacked, showered, and tried to drop back into normal life. But that tape kept pulling at my attention. A few days later, I took it out again and really looked at it under a light. The damage on the shell was obvious. It looked like it had been through rough weather. The label was slightly stained around the edges, like it had gotten wet and dried. The handwriting was steady, not rushed. Whoever wrote it wanted it to be readable. And that's when my curiosity got the better of me. I decided I needed a VHS player. I didn't own one. I don't think most people do anymore. But I figured I could find one cheap if I looked hard enough. I went online and searched through listings until I found the cheapest one I could, $5. That alone should have made me pause. Anything that old that still works should cost more than that, even at a garage sale. The seller was a young guy. He lived in a small, modest house, the kind with a short driveway and a lawn that needed mowing. He had a table out front with random items laid out like he was trying to clear out an entire life in one afternoon. Old tools, a few boxes of books, a lamp that looked like it had survived several moves. When I asked about the VHS player, he picked it up like it didn't matter at all. "It was my dad's," he said, like he was talking about a broken chair. "I'm selling off his stuff. Don't need any of it." He didn't seem sad, just done with it, like he wanted it all out of his house as fast as possible. He took my money, handed me the player, and that was it. No small talk, no questions about why I wanted it, no hope it works. I left with the VCR under my arm, the tape heavy in my bag, and a small, uncomfortable feeling I couldn't name. At home, I hooked it up to my TV. It took longer than I expected because the cords were old and the connections didn't fit as neatly as modern stuff. When I finally got it working, the screen flashed blue, then went black, then blue again. The whole thing made that soft, mechanical whir that sounds like another era. I sat down on the couch with the tape in my hands. For a second, I almost stopped. I don't mean in a dramatic way, just a simple pause, like part of me didn't want to know. Then I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was a tape. That was all. I slid it into the VCR. The image came on in that old 4:3 shape, with empty space on both sides of my wide TV. The picture was grainy. The colors were washed out. There was a faint static sound under everything, like the tape itself was tired. At first it looked normal. The footage started in the woods. A man was filming while walking on a trail. The camera shook with each step, and you could hear the crunch of leaves and the soft thud of boots. The person filming didn't say much at first. He wandered like he wasn't sure where he was going, panning the camera left and right to show trees, brush, and the winding path ahead. It went on like that for a couple of minutes. Honestly, I started to think it might just be some boring home video someone lost. Then the camera moved toward a thick patch of bushes, and the filming changed. It slowed down. The person holding the camera stopped walking like he'd reached a point he cared about. He pointed the lens through the branches at something in the distance, but it was out of focus at first. The shape was there, but blurry. I could tell it was a building, but not much else. The cameraman adjusted the settings. He zoomed in. The image sharpened, and the contrast changed. The focus clicked into place. There was a small house far away, sitting on top of a low hill. A dirt driveway ran down from it, cutting a rough line through the ground like a scar. The house looked plain from that distance, but it still stood out in a way that made my skin tighten. It felt out of place, like it didn't belong in the middle of so much forest. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of wind and the faint hum of the camera. Then the man finally spoke. "The compound," he said. His voice sounded tense, like he was trying to keep it steady. "People around here talk about this place. Here we are." The camera zoomed out slightly, but stayed locked on the house. Then it began to pan around the area, slow and careful, like the cameraman was checking for movement. On the left side of the property was dense forest. You could see parts of the dirt road stretching into the trees, disappearing into shadows. On the right was a fenced area, and inside it was an open field filled with junk. Not just a little junk. Piles of random objects, stacked together like someone had dragged years of furniture and appliances and tools into one spot and left them there. Chairs, metal frames, what looked like old cabinets, maybe a broken washer or dryer. It was hard to tell, but it was messy in a way that looked planned, like a barrier more than a dump. Beyond that was more forest. No neighbors, no other houses, no sign of normal life. The cameraman started explaining what he knew. He said the property used to belong to a family that lived there for around 50 years. Then it was sold, and now another family lived there. A family that had moved down from Canada to New England. The way he said it made it sound like the move itself was suspicious. Like anyone who comes from somewhere else must have a reason. He talked about gossip from the locals. He mentioned a homeowner not far away who had seen the family walking on trails. According to this story, the father was talking about something strange, something he shouldn't have been saying out loud. The mother, the homeowner claimed, stared at him with blank eyes, like she was angry or scared or trying to stop him without making a scene. The children just walked along, calm and unaware, like kids always are, like nothing bad could touch them because they didn't understand enough to be afraid. Then the cameraman told another story. A man near a lake was hunting deer on a cold morning. He looked through his rifle scope and saw the family strolling through the woods. At first, the hunter didn't think anything of it. People walk trails. People wander. But when he checked again later, he saw something that made him uneasy. The cameraman didn't describe the exact detail clearly, not in a way that made sense, but he said the hunter watched them turn and stare in the hunter's direction, like they could feel the scope on them. The hunter raised the rifle properly, trying to see their faces, trying to understand what they were doing. And the way the cameraman told it, it wasn't just that they looked up by chance, it was like they knew. The cameraman admitted those stories weren't that wild on their own. Families act weird. People exaggerate, rumors grow. But then he brought up a third story, and his voice changed when he did, like this was the one he believed. A hiker had been camping in the woods nearby. In the evening, while setting up his tent, he heard a noise outside the circle of his light. He looked around but saw nothing but trees. He tried to ignore it. He set up his tent, zipped himself in, and laid down. Then later he saw a silhouette standing right outside the tent. A human shape, close enough that the fabric barely separated them. The hiker froze. Before he even unzipped the tent to look, the silhouette moved away. The hiker heard footsteps retreating into the woods. The cameraman insisted the silhouette was from the family at the compound, that they were checking on anyone who got too close, that they didn't like strangers sleeping nearby. He talked like he was sure, like he'd already decided who the villain was and was just collecting proof. He even tried to make it sound almost reasonable at first, like maybe they were just paranoid doomsday preppers, the kind of people who stockpile supplies and set traps and think the world is ending any day now. But then he stopped himself, and you could hear his breathing pick up. Like the closer he got, the more he doubted his own explanation. Honestly, I thought about it for a while, he said. The camera still aimed toward the house. When I first heard the gossip, I figured it was just preppers. You know, a family making it clear they want to be left alone. But looking at it now, no. It's more than that. Whatever they're hiding, I need to know. Then he started moving toward the property. The camera bounced and shook as he went downhill, trying to stay low. He pushed through bushes and used the trees for cover. He wasn't walking like someone on a casual hike anymore. He was sneaking, stopping often, listening, scanning the area. It was daytime in the video, but the woods made it dim anyway. Shadows lay between the trunks now, and the house sat on its hill like it was watching. Eventually, he reached the side of the house and crouched near a closed window. The camera lifted, and the lens aimed into the house. The inside looked empty. Not nobody is home empty. Not minimal furniture empty. It was stripped. There were cabinets and a counter and what looked like a kitchen, but no fridge, no stove, none of the usual things. The space felt wrong, like a set built to look like a home, but never meant to be lived in. The floors looked clean, too clean, with none of the little marks and clutter that real life leaves behind. The cameraman didn't seem to notice anything beyond the lack of furniture at first, but I did. In the far end of the house, in a darker area beyond the kitchen, there was a shadowy figure. It wasn't clear enough for me to say exactly what it was. It wasn't sharply shaped. It looked like a person standing still, just inside the darkness where the light from the window didn't reach. The figure didn't move, and that almost made it worse. If it had moved, I might have been able to tell myself it was a trick of the light. But it stayed there, like it belonged there. The cameraman shifted the camera away, aiming it down toward his feet, and started talking again. "Okay," he whispered. "This is the house. I'm going to see what's inside first before I get in." Then he stood up and peeked in through the window again. This time his voice had confusion in it. "Where the hell is the furniture?" he muttered. He kept staring like he expected to see someone sitting at a table or walking through a hallway. But there was nothing, just empty rooms. He tried the window. It opened, and the sound of the latch clicking made my stomach tighten. He pushed it up and climbed in. The camera pointed down while he stepped onto the floor inside. Then it lifted, and he walked through the house filming everything. Room after room, it was the same. Empty. Bare walls. Clean floors. Occasional fixtures like ceiling fans or a heater. But nothing personal. Nothing lived in. Nothing that said a family of parents and children actually stayed there. It didn't feel abandoned either. Abandoned places gather dust. They smell. They rot. This place looked maintained, but for what purpose? The cameraman started getting angry, like he'd built up fear and excitement for nothing. "How does this make any sense?" he said, voice shaking now. "This place is empty." "It's been empty this whole time?" He sounded like he wanted the house to make sense, even if the sense was something bad. But empty was worse, because empty meant there was something else going on, something he couldn't explain. Then he found a door that led to the basement. The camera angled down the stairs, and the basement was brightly lit. That stood out immediately. If nobody was home, why was a basement light on? The cameraman paused, and you could hear him breathing. "Why is this one on?" he whispered. Then, after a short pause, like he was arguing with himself, he added, "Should I check downstairs?" "Fuck it." He went down. The descent felt long because the camera stayed focused on the stairs, and the only sound was his heavy steps. Each step landed a little harder, like he was trying to move quietly, but his fear was making him clumsy. The air down there looked colder somehow, even through the old grainy picture. When he reached the bottom, he swung the camera around. The basement was empty too. No boxes, no laundry machines, no storage. Just open space and bare walls. It looked like a basement that had been cleared out completely, scrubbed down, and left waiting. And then he saw something on the wall. A sticky note placed on the far wall across from the stairs. It was small and bright against the dull background, like someone wanted it to be noticed. The cameraman walked toward it, and the camera zoomed in until the writing filled the screen. "Found you." That was all it said. 2 simple words, and I felt dread hit me hard, like my body understood the danger before my brain did. The cameraman made a choking sound, a sharp inhale like he'd been punched. His hand reached out and peeled the note off a wall. For half a second, the paper shook between his fingers. Then he dropped it. He didn't speak. He didn't try to explain. He just turned and ran. The camera jerked wildly as he sprinted back up the stairs, through the empty house, toward the window. The footage became hard to follow. The picture blurred. The edges of walls and door frames streaked across the screen. He threw himself out through the window opening and hit the ground outside. You could hear him grunt, then keep running. And then there were footsteps behind it. At first it was faint, like maybe it was just his own echo. But it grew louder, faster, more than one set. The cameraman gasped and made a sound that was half panic and half disbelief. "Fuck!" he shouted. "They're chasing me!" The camera bounced so hard I could barely tell what I was seeing. It was mostly flashes of trees, patches of sky, and dark shapes moving between them. But the sound was clear enough. Multiple people were running after him, close enough that their footsteps stacked over his like a drum beat. He didn't stop filming. Or maybe he couldn't. Maybe his hand was locked around the camera in that tight way people grip things when they're terrified. Like the camera was the only solid thing in the world. After a couple of minutes of chaos, the camera fell. It hit the ground, and the angle tilted up toward the grass and the lower part of the trees. The sound kept going, running, shouting. Then a figure crossed the frame, moving away, probably the cameraman, still sprinting. Behind him, faint beams of light swept through the woods. Flashlights. The pursuers were using flashlights, and the light moved in quick, searching arcs like they were trained to hunt. Then the camcorder's night vision clicked on, turning everything into that eerie green-gray look. And in that new view, I saw something that made my blood feel cold. Behind the people with flashlights, something else moved. It was like a shadow sliding across the ground, gliding rather than running, keeping pace without effort. It didn't look like a person. It didn't have clear legs. It was just a shape, dark and smooth, moving in the same direction as the chase, like it was part of it. Like it was alive in a way shadows aren't supposed to be. Then one of the pursuers stopped. The flashlight beam swung, and the person turned around slowly and looked straight toward the camera lying in the grass, like they knew it was there, like they knew it was watching, like they were aware of me sitting in my living room decades later, staring at my TV. The person was wearing elaborate black robes with metallic details that caught the light along the neckline and down the front. It wasn't a simple coat. It looked ceremonial almost. Something you'd wear for a ritual, not for hiking through the woods. And their face was covered. A pale white mask, smooth and blank-looking, stared directly at the lens. The figure didn't rush to pick up the camera. They didn't stomp it. They just looked at it, perfectly still for a moment that felt too long. Then the tape ended. The screen went blue again, and the VCR made that quiet whirring sound like nothing had happened. Like it had just shown me a normal home video. I sat there with the remote in my hand, staring at the blank screen, waiting for my brain to catch up. I replayed parts of it, even though I didn't want to. I paused on the frame where the house first came into focus. I paused on the empty kitchen. I paused on the basement note. Found you. I paused on the robed figure, trying to see any detail in the mask that could prove it was fake, like a Halloween mask from a store. But the quality was too poor to be sure, and that made it worse. When things are unclear, your mind fills in the gaps with the scariest options. After I finally turned the TV off, questions started piling up in my head, one after another, until it felt like I couldn't breathe around them. Who were those people chasing him? Why would a family live in a house with nothing inside? Why was the basement light on? Why would someone leave a note like that? Like they'd been waiting for him? And that shadow behind them, what was that supposed to be? A trick of the camera? A weird lighting effect? Or something that only showed up when the night vision kicked in? The biggest question was simpler, and somehow more disturbing. How did that tape end up under a pile of branches where I found it? If this was recorded by someone creeping into that house, why would the tape be hidden near a trail, buried, like someone didn't want it found, but also didn't want to destroy it. It felt less like something that got lost and more like something that got placed. And it wasn't even the only tape. That's the part I didn't mention at first because even writing it out makes me feel stupid. But during that hike, I found more tapes. Not all at once, not in a neat stack. They were spread out across the woods in strange places, like someone had been leaving them behind on purpose. One was tucked near a fallen log, like it had been slid there by hand. Another was wedged between rocks near a bend in the trail where you'd only see it if you stepped off the path. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I thought it was litter, or some weird stash, or maybe part of a joke I didn't understand. Now, after watching the one labeled "For Mom," it doesn't feel like a joke. It feels like bait. It feels like the woods are full of these little recorded pieces of someone else's nightmare, and I just happened to pick one up and bring it home. And the more I think about that sticky note in the basement, the more it feels like it isn't only aimed at the man behind the camera. Found you. Ever since I watched it, I've had this crawling feeling that I did something I wasn't supposed to do. Not in a super dramatic way where I think a masked cult is going to kick my door down tonight. It's more subtle than that. It's the sense that I crossed a line without knowing it was there. Like I opened a door and now I can't fully close it again. I keep telling myself I can just stop. I can throw the tapes away, smash them, forget all of it. But curiosity is a stupid, strong thing. And now that I've seen one, I can't stop thinking about what might be on the others. If the first tape ended like that, what happens next? Did the cameraman get away? Did he get caught? Was the tape meant to be a warning or proof or a message to someone who never got it? In my head, it already feels like a curse, like I'm slowly pulling on a thread that's going to tighten around me the more I tug. I hate that I even think like that. I hate that a plastic tape from the woods has gotten into my head so deeply. But it has. And the worst part is this. Every time I tell myself I shouldn't watch another one, I picture that last frame, the white mask turning toward the camera, that perfect stillness, that feeling that it wasn't just looking at the lens, but looking through it, like it understood exactly what it was doing, like it knew the footage would be found, like it knew someone would eventually press play. Story 3. I've been best friends with a girl I'll call Sarah for as long as I can remember. It's not one of those friendships that started in middle school or because we had the same class schedule. Our families were close before either of us was even born. Our moms have photos together from back when they still had huge hair and film cameras. We grew up in each other's houses so often that sometimes I'd wake up on her couch and, for a second, forget which home I was in. Sarah is older than me by 2 months. It sounds like nothing, but it mattered once we were kids. It meant she started school first. It meant she learned little things first, and then showed me like she was teaching her younger sibling. It meant she got to tease me for being the baby, even though we were basically the same age. Now we're both 21, and those 2 months mean nothing. But when we were younger, it was part of the rhythm of us. Sarah has always been the outgoing one. She's funny in a way that pulls people in without trying. She's the type who walks into a room and makes it feel warmer just because she's there. Even when she was a kid, she would talk to strangers in grocery store lines like they were old friends. She always dressed bright, too, reds, yellows, loud blues, anything that made her stand out. She liked shiny jewelry and loud earrings. She could turn a basic outfit into something that looked planned. I've always been the opposite. I'm quieter. I sit back and watch before I speak. My closet is mostly darker colors. I'm not the kind of person who starts conversations with strangers unless I have to. But it never got in the way of our friendship. If anything, it made it work. Sarah pulled me out of my shell, and I kept her grounded when she got carried away. I was the one trailing behind her at the mall while she ran ahead, waving at people she recognized. I was the one she called after a bad day, even if she pretended she was calling just to gossip. For most of our lives, Sarah felt like the most stable thing I had, even when everything else changed. Schools, jobs, relationships, family drama. Sarah was still Sarah. She might get a new hairstyle or a new obsession for a few weeks, but she always came back to herself. Then, close to a year ago, she changed in a way I still can't fully explain. It started with a phone call on a normal day. I was doing something small, something forgettable, like folding laundry or scrolling through my phone. When I saw her name on the screen, I smiled automatically. Talking to Sarah was usually easy. It was usually the best part of my day. I answered like I always did. "Hey, Sarah, what's up?" The voice on the other end was definitely hers. Same tone, same sound, the same way she breathed between words. But something was wrong. The energy wasn't there. It was like hearing a song you know by heart, but the notes are just slightly off. "Hey," she said, then paused. "This might sound off, but you're OP, right?" I laughed because I thought she was messing with me. Sarah loved building up to a joke. She loved confusing people, then revealing the punchline. "Yeah," I said. "This is OP?" "Oh, okay," she said quickly, like she'd been holding her breath. "That's good. That's good." There was silence. Sarah was never silent like that. Not with me. If she didn't know what to say, she would fill the space with something, anything, until she found the point she wanted to make. Then she asked, careful and strange, "Do you remember inviting me to hang out at the park last week?" That threw me off. Not because it was a crazy question, but because it didn't match reality. I remember you inviting me," I said slowly. "Not the other way around." "Me?" she said, and her voice went thin. "I invited you? Not you inviting me?" "No," I said. "Is something wrong?" She didn't answer. I could hear her breathing, fast and uneven, like she was trying not to panic. "Sarah," I said, "are you there?" "Sorry," she said quickly, like she just remembered she had to speak. Listen, do you remember?" "Do I remember what?" I asked. Another pause, then quieter. "Do you remember Lucy being there?" I frowned. "Lucy? What Lucy?" The line went dead for a second, not like it disconnected, but like she stopped existing on the other end. Then she made a sound like she was swallowing a sob. "Oh, no," she whispered. No. I sat up straighter. "Sarah, what is happening? Is this a prank?" "It's not a prank," she snapped, and her voice cracked. "Lucy, don't tell me you don't know who Lucy is. You're joking, right?" "Please tell me you're messing with me." Then she started crying. Not the cute, Sniffly kind of crying where you can talk through it. Real crying. The kind where your breathing breaks and your words come out wrong. I kept saying her name, kept asking what was wrong, kept telling her to slow down. I tried to calm her the way I always had when she got overwhelmed. But the more I tried, the worse she sounded, like she was falling deeper into something she couldn't climb out of. Finally, after a long stretch of broken words I couldn't understand, she forced out, "I'll talk to you tomorrow," and hung up. I called her back immediately. It went to voicemail. I called again. She rejected it. I texted her asking if she was okay. She replied a few minutes later, begging me to leave her alone until the next day. I didn't know what to do with that. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling helpless and irritated at the same time. Sarah was dramatic sometimes, but this didn't feel like drama. It felt like fear. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the call. I kept hearing her say Lucy like it was someone I was supposed to know, someone important. I kept seeing her name on my screen and imagining her alone, crying, thinking she had lost her mind. I tried to think of what could cause that kind of sudden panic. Drugs, a breakdown, a cruel joke someone played on her, but none of it fit. The next day, I went to work on 3 hours of sleep and pure stubbornness. Everything felt too bright and too loud. My hands felt clumsy. I kept checking my phone. I kept waiting for another call. About an hour before my shift ended, I got a text from Sarah. "Are you free to talk?" Relief hit me so hard it almost made me angry. I typed back that I'd be free after work. Her reply came almost right away. "Wait, you have a job?" I stared at the screen. Sarah knew I had a job. She knew where I worked. She had picked me up from there before. She had met me for lunch on my breaks. This wasn't something you could forget. I left work with my stomach in knots and drove straight to her house. Her parents both worked late, so it was just Sarah and me. When she opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked like a different person, but because she looked like someone pretending to be Sarah. She was wearing black sweatpants and a gray hoodie. Sarah used to hate gray. She called it the color of giving up. She used to joke that gray was for people who had stopped caring. Now she was wrapped in it, like it made her feel safe. She let me in without much of a greeting. We sat in the living room, and the silence between us felt heavy. She didn't turn on music. She didn't make jokes. She didn't grab snacks the way she normally did, like hosting me was a fun little event. Instead, she sat with her knees pulled up, arms tight around her legs. She kept looking at me, not like a friend looking at a friend, but like someone studying a stranger, checking for details that might prove something. It made my skin crawl a little. Not because she was scary, but because it was so wrong for her. I cleared my throat. "So," I said gently, "what was that yesterday? Did something happen?" Sarah swallowed. Her eyes flicked to the hallway, then back to me, like she was checking if someone was listening. Then she said very quietly, "I think I'm not where I'm supposed to be." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "Yesterday I took a nap," she said. "I woke up and everything was wrong. My room, my clothes, this house, everything. It's like someone rebuilt my life but did a sloppy job. Like they got the shape of it right, but the details are off." I tried to smile like I was keeping things calm. "Okay," I said. "But you're here. You're at home." No, she said, and her voice sharpened, like she needed me to understand. This isn't my home. It looks like it. It's in the same place, but it's not the same. She shifted, gripping her knees even tighter. Even you, she said, and her gaze went right to my face. You're healthy. Your hair is shorter. Your clothes are different. It's like we swapped wardrobes or something. It's driving me insane. I sat there trying to find the right response. I couldn't. The words didn't fit any normal conversation I'd ever had. My first instinct was that she was messing with me. My second instinct, right behind it, was that something was wrong with her mentally. Anxiety can do weird things. Stress can make you confused. Lack of sleep can make your memory unreliable. I wanted so badly for this to have a simple explanation. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Sarah, honey, it's okay. I'm here. I don't know what's going on, but we can talk to your parents, and we can... She cut me off, raising her hand like a stop sign. No. Don't do that. They'll think I'm crazy. I hesitated. Sarah. O.P., she said, and her voice shook. I'm not having some kind of crisis. I'm not losing it. I don't know how else to say it. I think I woke up in a different reality. I stared at her. A different reality? I repeated. Like timeline shifting, she said fast, like she needed to get it all out before I stopped her. Multiverse stuff. Different versions of the same world. I didn't answer because what do you say to that? Her face tightened with frustration. Jesus, she started, then stopped herself like she surprised even herself. Then she kept going anyway. We watched so many videos on this last summer. My stomach dropped for a different reason. Sarah hated swearing. She was the kind of person who would smack your arm if you said something too crude around her. And the summer she was talking about didn't match my memory. Last summer, our families went to a beach resort together. It was one of those trips where the days blend into sunscreen and loud dinners and sunburn. Sarah flirted with a Jamaican guy at the snack bar so hard she couldn't even deny it. She wrote his number on a napkin like she was in a movie. I said it out loud. We went to a beach resort, I told her. With both our families. You flirted with this Jamaican boy half the time. Sarah's expression collapsed into something tired and bitter. Of course, she muttered, like she'd expected that answer. She rubbed her forehead like it hurt. Then she looked back at me with this desperate focus. Okay. What about the Mandela effect? You know that, right? I nodded slowly. Yeah, that one I know. It's when people remember things differently than how they happened. Yes, she said quickly. So imagine that, but not just one memory. Not just a movie quote or a logo. Imagine you wake up and your whole life is like that. Like the world is almost your world, but every part of it is slightly wrong. I swallowed. And you're saying that happened to you? Yes, she said. Some things are the same, but they're tilted. Like they're close enough to mess with me. I didn't want to say what I was thinking, but it came out anyway. Sarah, you need to understand that you sound completely insane. She flinched, but she didn't get angry. She just looked exhausted. Then she said, I want you to look me in the eyes and tell me I look insane. So I did. And something in me softened immediately. Because I knew that look. I'd seen it before, in rare moments when Sarah's confidence broke and the real fear underneath showed through. The look she got when she messed up badly and didn't know how to fix it. The look she had when she was small and scared and trying not to cry in front of anyone. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a prank. It was desperation. I didn't suddenly believe in alternate realities, not fully, but I believed she believed it, and that mattered. So I listened. Over the next hour, she told me about the differences she'd noticed. At first, they were small things. Her phone background was different. Her clothes didn't feel like her clothes. Some of her makeup brands weren't what she usually bought. Then it got bigger. She asked me about Lucy again. In Sarah's version of our lives, Lucy was our third best friend, not someone from a class we barely remembered, not a kid we lost touch with. Lucy was, according to Sarah, part of our core. Someone who spent weekends at Sarah's house with us. Someone who knew our secrets. Someone who had a laugh that filled rooms. But in my life, Lucy didn't exist. Sarah's eyes kept widening every time I told her that. Like she was waiting for me to break and admit it was a joke. Like she couldn't accept a world where a whole person could vanish like that. Then she told me Katie was different too. In her real world, Katie wasn't just a random girl from school. She was our enemy, not a silly teenage rivalry. Sarah described it like a long, personal war that had lasted years, full of fights and betrayals and ugly rumors. In my life, Katie was just Katie, a girl we knew, someone who existed on the edge of our social circle. Not a friend, not an enemy, just a person. Sarah told me about Mr. Lanster, too. In her world, he was arrested for dating a student back in high school. In mine, he was a well-liked teacher. The idea of him being arrested felt wrong in my mouth. I didn't even like him that much, but he didn't seem like a criminal. Not in my memory. Every time Sarah brought up a detail like that, her hands would tighten around her legs, knuckles pale. She was trying so hard to hold herself together, like if she let go for even a second, she would crack. She kept asking me questions, like she was building a map of this version of reality. She wanted dates, names, outcomes. She wanted to know what had happened in this timeline so she could blend in and not get caught. Caught by who? I didn't know. But Sarah acted like getting caught was a real risk, like the world would punish her if she didn't play her part. I thought the whole thing would fade after a few days. I thought maybe she'd calm down. Maybe she'd realize she'd mixed up memories. Maybe something would click and she'd laugh and say she'd been stressed and spiraled. But it didn't fade. Weeks passed, and Sarah stayed different. Her taste changed. She didn't wear bright colors anymore. She didn't talk the same way. Some of her favorite foods weren't her favorites. Some of her old jokes fell flat because she didn't remember the context. And the strangest part was that in some ways, she fit better with me now. Her new quiet matched my quiet. She didn't drag me into loud places as often. We'd sit in my car and just talk, low and serious, like two people sharing a secret. I hate admitting this, but there were times I enjoyed being with her more than before. The old Sarah had been fun, but she could be exhausting. This Sarah felt closer to my speed. That made me feel guilty because if she was telling the truth, it meant I was enjoying her suffering. And if she wasn't telling the truth, it meant something was wrong with her and I was enjoying the way it changed her. Then things got worse. Sarah started getting sick. At first it was small, like headaches and nausea. She would cancel plans because she felt off. Then she started losing weight in a way that didn't look healthy. Her skin looked paler. There were dark shadows under her eyes, like she hadn't slept in days. She got tired fast, like walking upstairs took effort. Doctors ran tests. Nothing clear came back, at least not that I was told. Sarah's parents got nervous. They started watching her closely. Sarah stopped leaving the house much at all. Then she went into the hospital. My routine changed overnight. I went from seeing her a few times a week to visiting her almost every day. The hospital smell started sticking to me. That clean, harsh scent that never fully goes away, mixed with something faintly human underneath it. The lights in the halls were always too bright and everything felt too quiet, even with the beeping machines. As Sarah got worse, the time I was allowed to see her got shorter. Some days the nurses said she needed rest. Some days her parents looked too tired to argue with hospital staff. Some days Sarah looked like she was fading even while she was awake. Still, she could talk. Her voice got weaker, but her mind was sharp, and her fear never left. Last week was the last time I saw her. She looked so frail it scared me. Her cheeks had hollowed. Her hands looked too thin. Her eyes were huge in her face, like her body had shrunk around them. I remember thinking, in a very calm and horrible way, that she looked like someone who was already halfway gone. We talked for a while about nothing important, because it felt safer. I told her stupid little stories about work. I told her who had annoyed me that day. She smiled sometimes, but it didn't reach her eyes. Near the end of the visit, when I could tell the nurse was getting ready to make me leave, Sarah suddenly changed the subject. "I've been cursed," she said, like she was stating a fact. "What?" I asked, thrown off by how flat her voice was. "I found out the truth," she said. "I've been cursed to die here, in a reality that isn't mine." A cold feeling spread through my chest. Part of me wanted to dismiss it immediately, but another part of me couldn't. Not after everything. Not after how consistent she'd been, how terrified she'd been, how much her whole life had changed. I tried to be careful. "How did you come to that conclusion?" I asked. "An old man came yesterday," she said. "An old man?" I repeated. "Someone you didn't know?" She nodded. She stared down at the white bedsheets, and I noticed she wouldn't meet my eyes. It wasn't like she was shy. It was like she was ashamed. Or like she was afraid of what I'd see if she looked at me too long. "He had kind eyes," she said quietly. "Like he felt sorry for me. He told me he knew what was happening." My mouth went dry. "What did he say?" "He said I was cursed back in my original reality," she said. "He said someone did it to me. And he said this world can't hold me. Like I don't fit here. Like my body is rejecting it." "That's suspicious," I said slowly. "Did you tell anyone else about the reality thing, besides me?" "No," she said. "Only you. That's why it's weird. How would he know?" I didn't have an answer. My brain kept trying to turn it into something normal, but it wouldn't cooperate. I asked, "How did he offer to help?" Sarah's fingers tightened on the sheet. "He said he could undo it," she whispered. "He could send me back before I die." Hope flickered in me without permission. "Then that's good, right?" I said. "If there's a way." "But it costs something," she cut in. "A cost?" I asked. "What cost?" Sarah swallowed. Her throat moved like it hurt to do it. "I'll tell you later," she said. "I need time to think." Something about that answer made my stomach twist. It wasn't just fear. It was the sense that she already knew what the cost was. And she didn't want to say it out loud because saying it would make it real. I wanted to push. I wanted to demand details. I wanted to tell a nurse, tell her parents, tell anyone who would listen that some strange old man was talking to my best friend about curses and costs. But the hospital already treated Sarah like she was fragile. I didn't want them to treat her like she was delusional too, and I didn't want Sarah to shut me out, so I didn't pressure her. I held her hand for a minute. I told her I loved her. I told her I'd see her soon. She nodded like she was trying to memorize my face. Then I left. I went home that night with my head full of static. I didn't sleep well. Every time I started to drift off, I'd picture Sarah's eyes, the way she wouldn't look at me when she talked about the old man. I kept thinking about that word, cost. I kept thinking about the way she said she'd tell me later, like later was something she wasn't sure she'd reach. This morning, I woke up in a room that isn't mine. At first, it was just confusion. That slow, foggy moment where you blink and try to remember where you fell asleep. Then I sat up, and the confusion turned sharp. My bed felt wrong. The sheets were a different texture. The pillow was thinner. The light coming through the window hit the walls in the same angle as always, but the walls weren't the same. The color was wrong, like someone had repainted and chosen the closest shade they could find without getting it right. I looked around, and my skin went cold. My room was my room, but not. The furniture was in the same general places, but it wasn't the same furniture. The dresser looked newer. The chair in the corner was a different style. I saw pictures on the wall that made my throat tighten because I didn't remember taking them. Photos of me in places I couldn't name, with people I didn't recognize, smiling like I belonged there. I stumbled out of bed and looked down at myself. I looked like me. My body was the same. My hands were my hands, but my clothes weren't. I was wearing a shirt I didn't own. The fabric was softer than anything in my closet. The design on the front was something I would never pick. I went to my mirror and my reflection stared back, and it was my face. But something about it felt unfamiliar, like looking at yourself after someone else has been borrowing your life. I walked out into the hallway. The house layout was the same, but the small details were wrong. Different decorations, different frames, different little items on shelves. My heart beat harder with every step. In the living room, the couch was different. The rug pattern was different. The whole space looked like a copy of my house made from memory, with errors. My phone was on the table. I grabbed it with shaking hands, and for a second I felt relief. Like at least my phone would be normal. Then the screen lit up. My email was different. My usernames were different. Some apps were logged into accounts I didn't recognize, but the profile pictures were of me. Me smiling in photos I'd never seen. Me living a life I didn't remember. I sat down hard on the couch, this wrong couch, and tried to breathe. It hit me slowly, then all at once. Sarah's story, the nap, the wrong house, the wrong clothes, the way she looked at me like she was checking if I was real, the way she said this reality couldn't sustain her, the way she said the old man could send her back, but it had a cost. I think I know what happened. I don't belong here. And the worst part, the part that makes my stomach turn as I write this, is that I don't think this is a mistake. I think someone paid the cost. I think Sarah didn't just disappear. I think she traded places with me. Because I'm here now. In a version of my life that doesn't fit. And I can feel it in every wrong detail, every picture I don't remember, every login that isn't mine. I look the same, and I sound the same. And if anyone saw me, they would call me by my name. But I can feel it, deep and sick and certain. I am not me. Story 4, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with scary things. I don't mean in a cool, fearless way either. I was honestly a total wuss about it. I loved anything creepy, but I also couldn't always handle it. I would beg to watch scary videos, then hide my face behind a pillow when the scary part came. I would read about horror movies I wasn't allowed to see and imagine the scenes in my head. I would get excited every time Halloween season started, because it felt like the whole world was finally matching what I liked. My family knew it too. It was like a running joke that I loved scary stuff, even though it scared me. One year, a family member decided to take me to a Halloween store that had just opened near us. I don't remember the name of the store now, but I remember the building had a big pumpkin on top. That pumpkin is one of those weird details that stayed clear in my mind, even though a lot of the rest of the day is blurry. I don't remember much about the inside of the store either, except that everything felt huge to me, like the aisles were longer and darker than a normal store. The lighting had that seasonal orange and purple vibe, and it made every decoration look more real than it should have. I had a big fear of zombies back then, so I remember there was a creepy zombie sign that really got to me. I can still picture it in that way kids remember things, where it looks 10 times scarier than it probably was. I kept looking away from it, but I also couldn't stop checking to make sure it hadn't changed or moved. I tried to act brave anyway because I didn't want my family member to think I was being a baby, but I was definitely tense the whole time. We walked around and looked at different aisles, and I kept getting pulled between excitement and fear, like I wanted to see everything and also wanted to run out. Eventually, we finished looking around, and because my brain always goes back to food, I asked if we could go to Chipotle. They agreed, and I remember feeling that relief kids get when they're done with something scary. And now there's reward. I was already thinking about the smell of rice and the way the restaurant always felt bright and safe compared to the Halloween store. We started walking toward the exit, and that's when I saw the clown. The reason it still confuses me is because I'm pretty sure we came in and went out through the exact same doors. The entrance and exit were the same. But I swear I did not see that clown when we walked in. If it had been there the whole time, I feel like I would have noticed it. Clowns weren't even my biggest fear back then, but I still hated them. And this one wasn't a small decoration sitting on a shelf. It was a statue, big enough that I had to walk around it. I don't remember it being an animatronic. I never saw it move. Not like those store displays that suddenly jerk forward or laugh when you step on a sensor. It looks still, like a statue. But I remember every detail of it way too clearly for something that was just a decoration. Its skin was a mix of white and gray, like it had been dusted with ash. Its body was short and wide, like a squat little tank of a clown. It had massive red shoes that looked cartoonish, and a red nose that was too bright compared to the rest of its face. The smile was the worst part. It was stretched wide and high, like it was enjoying a secret joke. The outfit looked like black and white stripes mixed with yellow overalls, like somebody couldn't decide whether it should look playful or disturbing and chose both. It was holding an axe, and I remember green goo dripping off the blade. The goo was obviously meant to look gross and fake, but something about the color made it look wrong, like the kind of green you don't normally see in real life. It looked like poison. It looked like sickness. As I walked past it, I got this immediate feeling that it was watching me. I know that sounds dramatic, and I know it's the kind of thing people say all the time about creepy objects, but that's exactly what it felt like. Its eyes seemed to follow me as I moved. I didn't want to stare too hard because I was scared that if I looked at it too long, something would happen. At the same time, I felt like I couldn't look away because I needed to keep track of it. The grin seemed wider the longer I looked at it, like my brain was picking up on tiny changes. It didn't actually move in any obvious way, but I felt like it was adjusting, like it was aware of me being afraid and enjoying it. I remember leaving the store feeling creeped out and confused, like my head was full of buzzing. My family member was acting normal, like nothing had happened, and I tried to act normal too. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I just wanted to get to Chipotle and be done with that store. We drove to Chipotle, parked, and my family member told me to stay in the car while they went inside. They locked the doors. I sat there with an iPad trying to distract myself. It was daytime, and the parking lot wasn't completely empty, but it wasn't packed either. Everything should have felt normal. Then something in one of the mirrors caught my eye. I glanced up and I saw the clown standing directly behind the car. Not in my imagination. Not as a quick flash. I saw it. The same short, wide body, the same red shoes, the same red nose, the same insane smile. It was close enough that I could make out the colors clearly. I felt my stomach drop so hard I thought I might actually throw up. My whole body went stiff. I remember staring into its eyes through the mirror, and the weirdest part was the feeling that every time I looked away and looked back, it was closer, like it was using the moments I wasn't watching it to move forward. I know I was a kid, but I wasn't the kind of kid who saw things all the time. I didn't have an active imagination in that way. I wasn't prone to hallucinating. I didn't tell my parents wild stories for attention. This was the one thing from my childhood that I remember being completely sure of. The parking lot felt too quiet. It felt like the air had thickened. Nobody else seemed to be looking in my direction. My family member was still inside, and from where they were standing, they wouldn't have been able to see me or the back of the car. It felt like I was trapped in my seat with something right behind me, and nobody would believe me if I screamed. I panicked. I reached for the door handle and shoved the door open. The car alarm went off instantly. It was loud enough to make my ears ring. That sharp, blaring noise exploded into the parking lot, and suddenly everything was moving. People turned their heads. A couple of people ran out of the restaurant because they saw a kid standing next to a car with an alarm screaming. I remember someone shouting, asking if I was okay, asking where my parents were. My family member came out too, rushing toward me with a confused, angry look, like they thought I was just being difficult. As soon as I stepped out and looked behind the car, the clown was gone. Just gone. Like it had never been there. People were staring at me, and I didn't even know what to say. I felt embarrassed and terrified at the same time. I tried explaining, but it came out messy. I said there was a clown. I said it was behind the car. People looked around like they expected to see someone in a costume. Nobody saw anything. My family member got me back into the car, calmed the situation down, and eventually we drove away. I remember the drive home feeling wrong, not like I was just a kid coming down from a scare, but like something was following us. I kept checking the mirrors. I kept looking out the side windows. I had that tight, heavy feeling on my chest, like I couldn't take a full breath. It was just me and my family member in the car, but I still felt watched. That night, I went to bed. At the time, I shared a room with my older sister. She had the real bed. I slept on a mattress on the floor. I had this little kid tent set up near my mattress and an elephant projector that would put stars and shapes on the ceiling. It was supposed to make me feel safe. Normally it did. I drifted off and had a nightmare that still sticks with me. In the dream, my room looked warped, like the walls were bending and stretching. There were lightning flashes, like a storm was happening even though we were indoors. The air looked sharp and bright in the way dreams do when they want to scare you. Hanging from the ceiling fan by its feet was something like a zombie baby clown. That's the only way I can describe it. It was small, but wrong-looking. Like a baby, but not human. Like a clown, but melted into something sick. It dangled and twisted slightly, and the fan above it looked like it was barely holding it up. I was the only one in the room. My sister wasn't there. Nobody was there to help me. I woke up with that sick, shaky feeling nightmares can give you. The kind where you're not sure you're awake yet. My hands felt weak and trembling. My stomach churned like I needed to throw up. I lay there for a second, trying to convince myself it was just a dream, trying to slow my breathing. Then I looked toward the doorway. At first I saw nothing, just darkness. The hallway light was off, and the doorway was a black rectangle. Then I saw the faintest suggestion of eyes and a smile, like the darkness itself had a face hiding in it. I froze. The face became clearer as my eyes adjusted, and my heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. It was the clown. The same clown from the store. The same white and gray skin. The same wide grin that looked too big for its face. I couldn't see the whole body clearly, just the face and part of the shape, like it was leaning in from the hall. I knew in that moment that I wasn't dreaming, not the way I had been dreaming. I was awake. I could feel the carpet under me. I could feel the cold air on my arms. I could hear my sister breathing in her bed. I moved as slowly as I could, like any sudden movement would make it rush at me. I didn't break eye contact. I sat up, then got onto my hands and knees and crawled toward my sister's bed. My whole body felt numb and electric at the same time. I climbed into her bed and shook her awake. I was whispering her name, trying not to cry too loudly, trying not to scream. She mumbled and turned, half asleep, annoyed like older siblings always are. In the moment I looked away from the doorway to focus on her, it felt like the room shifted, like I had given it an opening. When I looked back, the clown was gone. The doorway was just a doorway again, empty, dark, normal. My sister was awake enough now to ask what was wrong. I don't even remember what I told her. I think I said I had a bad dream. I think I said I saw something. I know she didn't take me seriously. Not fully. She was half asleep and didn't want to deal with kid drama in the middle of the night. In the morning, though, I saw something that made my stomach drop all over again. Our carpet was the type that showed marks easily. If you dragged your hand over it, you could see the direction the fibers were pushed. If you stepped hard, you could leave an imprint for a while. When I looked at the floor near my mattress, there were footprints pressed into the carpet. They were long, too long. Not like normal adult footprints. Long in a stretched, strange way, like whoever made them had feet that didn't match a human shape. The prints led toward the side of my sister's bed, like something had come into the room and stood there, watching us. Then they turned and went back out through the bedroom door. I showed my sister. I tried to show my parents. I tried to explain it. But you know how it is when you're a kid and you say something unbelievable. People smile like they're being patient. They offer easy explanations. They say it was probably just the carpet, or just a dream, or you must have walked there yourself. And eventually you start doubting your own memory because it's easier than fighting everyone. For years, that's what I did. I tried to be grown about it. I tried to tell myself it was childhood fear, Halloween season, a creepy decoration that got into my head. I tried to convince myself the clown in the parking lot had been a trick of reflection, or a person in a costume, or a kid's mind making shapes out of shadows. As I got older, I dismissed it even more. I'd remember it once in a while and feel embarrassed. I'd tell myself I had just scared myself and then filled in the gaps later. I'd tell myself that's what kids do. That worked until last week. I went out with friends for a movie, and afterward we walked across the street to a smoothie place for something to eat. It was late. Not late dinner late, but almost 1 a.m. late. The street was quiet and the parking lot was mostly empty. The kind of empty that makes every little sound stand out. I had some work calls to take, and my friends all had things they had to get to, so they slowly left one by one. Eventually, I was alone in the store except for the workers. I remember standing near the counter, finishing my call, trying not to feel awkward about being the last customer. When I walked outside, the air felt cooler than it had earlier. The parking lot lights made everything look pale. My car sat out there under one of the lamps, and the shadows around it felt deeper than they should have. As I walked toward my car, I got that same feeling I remembered from childhood. That sensation of being watched. Not just someone might be nearby, but something is paying attention to you. It made the back of my neck tighten. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just because it was late, and I was alone. Then, as I approached from the front, I saw something shift in the back seat. It was a quick movement, like a body settling or a shoulder turning. I stopped so suddenly my shoes squeaked a little on the pavement. My brain tried to solve it fast. Maybe someone was actually in my car. Maybe I forgot to lock it. Maybe one of my friends was playing a prank. But none of those thoughts made my fear drop. They made it worse. I changed my angle, moving toward the passenger side so I could see through the windows better. I kept my steps careful, like I didn't want to alert whatever was inside. And then I saw it. The clown was in the back seat, looking at me through the glass, smiling. For a second, I felt like my childhood had reached out and grabbed me by the throat. The same wide grin, the same unnatural calm, the same eyes that didn't look like they belonged to something harmless. I didn't think. I ran. I sprinted back into the smoothie shop so fast I nearly slipped. I shoved the door open and rushed up to the counter. I told the worker to call 911. My phone was in my hand the entire time, but I was shaking so badly my fingers didn't work right. I wasn't even using my brain. I was just reacting. The worker looked confused and scared when they saw my face. They called. I stood there trying to breathe, glancing out the window at my car like I expected it to explode. When the cops arrived, I told them someone was in the back seat of my car. I tried to explain it without sounding crazy. I kept it simple. I said I saw a person. I said I thought they broke in. I left out the clown part at first because I knew how it would sound. The cops went outside, opened my car, and searched it. They looked under the seats, checked the trunk, checked everywhere. They found nothing. No person, no weapon, no sign of forced entry. I felt my stomach twist with embarrassment and panic. I could tell they were starting to look at me like I was overreacting, like I'd seen a shadow and freaked out. Then one of them said they found something. A couple hairs, caught on the back seat fabric. Green hairs. Not blonde, not brown, not black. Green. They bagged them like it was evidence. They told me I was safe. They said it was probably some prank because Halloween season was coming up. They said maybe some teenager had messed with my car and run off when I came back. They said I was probably stressed. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. But in my chest, I knew it wasn't a simple prank. I knew what I saw. After that, things got worse. Earlier today, I woke up and found my front door wide open. I always lock it. I always check it. I stood there, staring at the open doorway with my heart pounding, listening for any sound in the house. Nothing. No TV noise, no footsteps, no voices. Just silence. And the carpet in my house is the same kind we had when I was a kid. The kind that shows impressions easily. Yesterday morning, I woke up and saw footprints in the carpet. Giant footprints. They led to the side of my bed like something had walked into my room while I was asleep, and stood there, close enough that if I'd opened my eyes at the wrong time, I would have seen it right beside me. Then the prints turned around and went back out through my bedroom door. I stood there staring at them so long my legs started to feel weak. It was like my body remembered that childhood morning, remembered looking at those stretched, too long prints and realizing something had been in my room. I've started feeling like I'm not safe anymore. Like whatever this is, it isn't just showing up to scare me and then disappearing. It feels closer now. It feels bolder. And then, a couple days after the car incident, it happened again. A friend asked me to go with them to pick up something they bought off Poshmark. The seller lived nearby, so it wasn't a long drive. I went along because I didn't want to be alone. I didn't say that out loud, but it was true. It felt better to be with someone, even if it was something simple like sitting in a car while they ran inside. My friend went up to the house to get the item. I stayed in the car waiting, trying to scroll my phone and act normal. The street was quiet. The windows of the houses were dark. I tried not to stare at my mirrors too much because I didn't want to trigger my own fear. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw it again, just staring at me. This time it was different. It wasn't smiling. It was frowning, like it was angry or disappointed. Its face looked wrong in a new way, dripping as if it had melted, like wax sliding downward, like the expression was collapsing off the skull. The grin that used to look wide and playful now looked ruined, stretched into something sick. My hands went numb on my lap. I didn't get out of the car this time. I didn't set off an alarm. I didn't run. I just sat there and held eye contact with it through the mirror like I was afraid that if I looked away, it would move closer. The same old rule from when I was a kid came back instantly, like my body had kept it stored away. Don't look away. When my friend came back outside and got into the car, the pressure in my chest loosened a little, like the moment had passed. I asked her if she saw anything. I asked carefully, like I didn't want to sound insane. She looked at me like I was speaking nonsense. She said she had no idea what I was talking about. Now I'm sitting here writing this, and I feel like I'm being watched even inside my own house. I keep hearing footsteps pacing in the hallway back and forth, like someone can't decide whether to come in or not. I hear breathing sometimes, but I'm so scared I can't even tell if it's my breathing or something else's. I tried telling my friends what happened. I thought at least one of them would believe me, or at least take me seriously enough to stay with me. But most of them acted like I was making it up. Some laughed like it was a joke. Some said I needed help in that tone people use when they think you're losing it. Most of them stopped answering my messages, and a few blocked me completely. It made me feel even more alone, like I was trapped in a story nobody else could see. I keep thinking about that old, scary story people used to tell at sleepovers, the one about the babysitter and the clown statue. The babysitter calls the parents and asks if she can cover up the clown statue because it's creeping her out. The parents get quiet and tell her to leave the house because they don't have a clown statue. The twist is always that the clown is a person, a killer, already inside. I never liked that story, not because it was the scariest, but because it felt too possible. It was the kind of scary that could happen in a normal house on a normal night. And lately I've had this horrible feeling that I'm about to become the babysitter in that story. I know there are versions where the babysitter escapes. I also know there are versions where she doesn't. I don't know what this thing is. I don't know if it's a ghost, a demon, a person, or something I can't even name. I don't know if it's been following me since I was a kid, or if I somehow invited it by noticing it, by being afraid of it, by making it real in my mind. I don't know if it's been watching me this whole time and just chose to come back when I was old enough to understand what was happening. The police think it's a prank. Part of me still wants to believe it's my imagination and childhood fear resurfacing. But then I see the green hairs. I see the open door. I see the footprints in my carpet, leading to the side of my bed like something stood there while I slept. I can't keep pretending this is nothing. I don't need advice. I don't even think advice would help at this point. If you're reading this and thinking, just do this or just do that, you don't understand the feeling of being watched by something you can't explain. Something that shows up and disappears like it controls the rules. I keep hoping it will end with someone laughing and admitting it was all a prank, and then I can finally breathe again. But deep down, I don't think that's what this is. I think it's going to keep showing up more and more. I think it's getting closer. I think it wants something, and I don't know what it is. I'll update tomorrow if I can. Story 5, I've never been big on lawn decorations. A bird bath here, a little solar light there, fine. But the full display thing has never been me. My next-door neighbor, though, lives for it. Mrs. Ellis is a widow in her early 70s, and her front yard looks like the seasonal aisle of a hardware store exploded and decided to settle permanently on her grass. Little wooden signs, painted stones, metal flowers that spin in the wind, miniature windmills, those stepping stone paths nobody actually steps on. But the real stars of her yard have always been the gnomes. She had 12 of them the last time I counted. They were the classic kind. Bright red, pointy hats, round noses, rosy cheeks, and tiny tools. They weren't fancy. They weren't rare. They were the kind of gnomes you can buy anywhere. Still, Mrs. Ellis treated them like they mattered. She moved them around with the seasons, cleaned them off after storms, and sometimes, when she was out front, I'd catch her talking to them the way you talk to something you don't want to admit you're lonely without. I used to think it was sweet in a sad way. Now they're gone. All 12 of them. Not stolen in the usual sense. Not like a kid ran off with one for a prank and dumped it in a ditch later. They're gone in a way that makes my stomach twist when I look at her empty yard. I don't know where they went, and I don't know why. But I don't think it was the kids on the block. I don't think it was Mrs. Ellis getting tired of them. I think they did it on purpose. I think they organized. I think they formed a cult, and then they left. It's hard to say exactly when it started, because I didn't exactly keep a journal about my neighbor's lawn ornaments. I didn't wake up every morning and check the gnomes like a security guard. Most days, I barely noticed them. They were just part of the view when I opened my blinds or pulled into my driveway. But there were a few that stood out simply because they were placed closer to the sidewalk. One had a little rake, frozen mid-sweep. One pushed a tiny wheelbarrow. Another looked like it was wrestling a garden hose. Those 3 were the ones that always caught my eye first. The first time I noticed something was off, I didn't even call it off. It was subtle. I'd come home from work and the wheelbarrow gnome would be angled a different way. Or the rake gnome would be a few inches farther left. The kind of thing you blame on wind or the ground settling, even though they were heavy ceramic and the grass wasn't exactly a slip and slide. Once or twice, I assumed Mrs. Ellis had moved them. She rearranged her yard all the time. It wasn't unusual for her to shift things around, but the changes started happening in a way that didn't match her usual habits. Mrs. Ellis had patterns. She liked symmetry. She liked little scenes. If she moved a gnome, she moved the others to match. What I was seeing felt random, like a hand nudging one figure in the dark and leaving the rest alone. Like a kid doing it for laughs. Like something just wanting me to notice. Then one morning, while I was dragging my trash can to the curb, I saw one of the gnomes lying face down in the street. It wasn't near the curb either. It was far enough out that a car could have hit it if someone was driving too fast. The sunlight made the chipped paint stand out. The gnome's arms were spread like it had been thrown. For a second, I just stood there staring, half annoyed and half uneasy. It's a quiet neighborhood. We don't have much trouble. Seeing anything broken in the road feels personal, like someone brought ugliness into a place that doesn't want it. I felt that automatic, annoying sense of responsibility that comes with living next to a nice, older woman. So I walked out, picked the gnome up, and brushed the grit off its back. It was heavier than I expected. The ceramic was cold in my hands. When I turned toward Mrs. Ellis's lawn to see where it belonged, that's when I noticed something that made the hair on my arms lift. All the gnomes were facing the street. The wheelbarrow gnome, the rake gnome, and the garden hose gnome stood in a perfect line a few feet from the curb, like they'd taken a step forward. The others were lined up behind them, not in their usual scattered gardening scene arrangement, but in rows. Their little painted faces were turned toward the road, toward the fallen one in my hands, like an audience watching a body being carried away. They wore the same cheerful expressions as always, that fixed, silly smile, those round, friendly eyes. But the way they were arranged made them look less cute and more satisfied, like they were witnessing something they'd planned. I looked up and down the street. It was empty. No jogger, no dog walker, no kids on bikes, no cars rolling by. Just me standing there holding a ceramic gnome, feeling foolish for even letting my brain go there. The gnome I'd picked up had scuffed paint on its face, the kind you'd get if it hit pavement hard. As I turned it, I noticed something else. It was missing its hat. A red, pointy hat should have been the brightest part of it. Instead, the top of its head was bare, the paint rough where the hat had been attached. I stared at it a moment longer than I should have, then let out a slow breath and told myself to stop being dramatic. A missing hat, a tipped-over gnome, kids, wind, nothing more. I walked up to Mrs. Ellis's front door. I figured she should handle it. Even if it was stupid, she deserved to know what was happening in her yard. And I'll admit it, the thought of her finding it herself later, broken and face down, made me feel guilty. When she answered the door and saw what I was holding, her face crumpled like I'd brought her bad news about a real person. "Oh, Mr. Pennyhill," she gasped, then grabbed the gnome from my hands like it was fragile. "What have they done to you?" Her voice shook. She turned it this way and that, looking for damage. "Peter, his hat. Oh dear, where is his little hat?" I hadn't known the gnome had a name. I hadn't even realized she knew my first name well enough to use it like that. She held the gnome close to her chest, as if it could hear her. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I didn't see a hat in the road or on the sidewalk. I just found him face down out there. She raised her hand as if to stop me from apologizing, like the apology belonged to someone else entirely. "They're always picking on Mr. Pennyhill," she said. And for a second, the way she said it made my stomach twist. "It's not your fault." Then she leaned down and spoke to the gnome in a soft voice. "But we'll fix you up, right as rain, won't we?" I hesitated, then asked the obvious question. "Who is? The kids around here?" I nodded toward the street. "If you want, I can talk to their parents. Somebody should stop messing with your things." Mrs. Ellis's eyes drifted just slightly, like she was looking past me at her lawn. The gnomes were still lined up, still watching. She didn't look shocked by their arrangement. She didn't react like she just realized something had been moved. That bothered me more than the gnomes did. "Oh, no need, Peter," she said too quickly. Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "But thank you. I'll fix him up and straighten this mess out." And with that, she turned and went back inside, still murmuring to the gnome like it was a wounded pet. She closed the door softly behind her. I walked back to my house, passing the line of gnomes as I went. Their painted eyes felt like they were fixed on me now. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself not to turn a harmless yard display into some kind of horror movie. Stupid prank, I thought. That's all it is. When I got home from work later that day, the yard had been rearranged again. All 12 gnomes were back in their usual places, like nothing had happened. Mrs. Ellis had repainted the damaged one. The chipped areas were smoothed out and colored in. She'd even added a small painted bandage on its cheek, a cute little detail that made my chest ache, because it was so clear she was trying to make things okay again. But the gnome was still missing its hat. That should have been the end of it. I wanted it to be the end of it. I wanted it to be a one-time thing, a mean prank, a harmless scare that would fade away. If it had ended there, I could have moved on and filed it under neighborhood nonsense. The next morning proved it wasn't ending. I stepped outside with my coffee, and the first thing I saw was that the gnomes had shifted again. Not much, not far, but they weren't facing the street anymore. Every single one of them was turned inward, toward the center of Mrs. Ellis's yard, like they were listening to something. I followed their gaze. Mrs. Ellis had these glass spheres in her yard, the kind that sit on little stands and reflect the whole world in a warped, shiny way. Gazing balls, I think they're called. She had 3 of them, and someone had moved them into an almost perfect triangle. Not a loose, somewhere around the flower bed triangle. A deliberate one. The spacing was measured. The points were neat. Something lay in the center of that triangle. I stood at the edge of my driveway for a few seconds, fighting with myself. It wasn't my yard. It wasn't my business. But the arrangement was so strange, and the gnomes were so still and attentive, that I couldn't walk away, so I went over. The grass felt damp under my shoes. The morning air was cool and smelled like soil. As I got closer, I realized what was in the center wasn't a bag or a dead animal or anything that would make sense in the middle of a yard. It was a pile of ceramic shards, broken pieces of a gnome. My stomach dropped. I crouched and picked up one shard carefully. The fresh paint was obvious, and there, across one piece, was a painted bandage. It was Mr. Pennyhill, the gnome Mrs. Ellis had fixed. The one she'd held like it was precious. The one she'd promised she'd make right as rain. It was smashed beyond repair, not cracked, not chipped, destroyed. The kind of damage you get when something is thrown hard or hit with something heavy. I sat back on my heels, suddenly angry. Angry at whoever did it, and angry at myself for being the one who found it. My first thought was to go knock on her door and tell her and watch her face fall. My second thought was that I couldn't do that to her. There are some kinds of hurt that feel too cruel to hand to someone in person. So I didn't tell her. I did the thing that seemed kinder in the moment, even though I'm still not sure it was the right thing. I scooped up the pieces, all of them, and carried them back to my trash bin. I dropped them in and closed the lid. The ceramic clinked against itself in a way that made me wince. Somehow it felt better to let her think he'd disappeared than to let her find him smashed in the middle of a triangle like some kind of message. When something you love disappears, there's still hope, even if it's irrational. Hope that it's out there somewhere, intact, waiting to be found. If she saw those pieces, there would be no hope left at all. After that, I was convinced it was the neighborhood kids. It had to be. This was the kind of stupid cruelty kids sometimes do when they're bored, and there isn't much to do around here. If it had only been moving gnomes around, I might have ignored it. But smashing one felt personal. It felt like somebody trying to hurt Mrs. Ellis on purpose. That night I spoke to a couple of neighbors. Then I spoke to a few more. I tried to keep it casual, like I wasn't accusing anyone directly, just asking if they'd seen kids messing around in Mrs. Ellis's yard. Most of them looked confused. A few looked uncomfortable, like the subject itself made them want to change the conversation. None of the parents had a clue. Most of them insisted their kids wouldn't do something like that. A few said their kids were too afraid of Mrs. Ellis's yard to go near it. They said it with a laugh, but the laugh was forced. I even asked the Dirks, because if anyone's kids were going to mess with lawn ornaments, it would be the Dirks boys. Those kids had blown up just about everything else in the neighborhood at some point. Fireworks in mailboxes, soda bottles in the street, homemade smoke bombs that made the whole block smell like burnt plastic. When I brought up Mrs. Ellis's yard, one of the boys stared at me like I'd asked him to walk into a cemetery at midnight. "We don't go over there," he said flatly. I raised my eyebrows. "Why not?" He shrugged, but his eyes flicked toward Mrs. Ellis's house. "Just don't." The other boy, quieter, asked me, "Why do you?" That question hit me harder than it should have, because up to that point I hadn't thought of it that way. I'd walked over there because I was being neighborly, because I was trying to help, because I didn't want Mrs. Ellis to be alone with whatever was happening. It never occurred to me that I might be the odd one out. But after that question, I couldn't stop thinking about it. If nobody else went near the yard, and Mrs. Ellis lived alone, then who was moving the gnomes? Who was arranging the gazing balls? Who was destroying things in neat little patterns? And why did the gnomes always seem posed like they were watching? That evening, on my way home, I slowed down in front of her house and looked at the yard longer than I ever had before. There were 11 gnomes now. It was obvious there was one missing, even if you didn't know the full story. The spaces between them looked wrong, like a group photo after someone has stepped out of frame. Mrs. Ellis had 3 gazing balls still, and one of those multicolored pinwheels that spin in the wind and squeak when they do. There were also a bunch of other cheap ornaments scattered around. A little welcome sign, a plastic flamingo, a fake stone that probably hid a key. But the gazing balls were arranged again, still a triangle, only the points were farther apart now, like the triangle had expanded, and the gnomes were placed inside it, not randomly, but like pieces in a game. They were circling around the gnome with the rake. That's when I felt it for the first time, clear and sharp, like a cold fingertip pressed to the back of my neck. The feeling that I was interrupting something. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. The yard was still, but the arrangement looked like a gathering, like a meeting, like a group turning their attention inward, away from the street, away from the world, focused on whatever was happening in the center. I caught myself staring too long. I forced myself to keep walking. I told myself I was letting boredom and stress feed my imagination. I told myself I needed sleep. That night I woke up once, not fully, just enough to realize I'd heard something outside. A soft tap, like ceramic against glass, then silence. I lay there listening for more, holding my breath, waiting for footsteps on the sidewalk or a car door or anything normal that would explain it. Nothing came. Eventually, I convinced myself it was a branch hitting a window in the wind, even though there wasn't much wind. The next morning, I stepped outside and saw Mrs. Ellis in her yard. She was pacing around like she'd lost something important. Her hands were on her head. She was mumbling to herself, not loudly, but enough that I could tell she wasn't just humming. She kept looking down at the ground, then up at the gazing balls, then toward the flower bed, then back to the center of the yard again, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I walked over, moving slowly, because something in the way she looked made me nervous. It wasn't just sadness. It was confusion mixed with fear, like the world had changed in front of her, and she didn't know how. "Mrs. Ellis?" I called softly. She didn't answer. She didn't even look at me right away. As I rounded the small hedgerow between our properties, I finally saw what she was staring at. The 3 gazing balls were still there. Same triangle pattern as the night before. The stands were placed like someone had measured the grass and marked the spots. The glass spheres reflected the morning sky in a warped way, bending the shape of the street and the houses and making everything look curved and wrong. But inside the triangle there was nothing left. No gnomes, no pinwheel, no little garden tools, no welcome sign, no flamingo, nothing, just bare earth. Not bare grass with the ornaments removed either. It looked like the grass had been scraped away, like something had taken the top layer of the lawn and peeled it back to reveal dirt underneath. The edges of the bare patch were rough, not clean but deliberate. It was an empty space where a whole little world had been. And sitting there in the dirt, arranged neatly like an offering, were 11 red pointy hats. They were placed in a loose row at first. Then I realized it wasn't a row. It was a curve, an arc, like a smile. The sight made my stomach lurch. I felt my throat tighten the way it does right before you get sick. For a second, my brain refused to label what I was looking at, because once you label it, it becomes real. Mrs. Ellis finally turned her head toward me, and her eyes were wet, but she didn't look like she was about to cry. She looked like she had cried already and didn't have anything left. "They took them," she said, voice flat. I swallowed. My mouth was suddenly dry. "Who did?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. She stared at the hats, not blinking for a long moment. "Not who," she whispered. "They." I glanced around the yard, around the street, down the sidewalk. Everything else looked normal. Birds in the trees, a car passing in the distance, a neighbor's sprinkler ticking on. The world acting like it hadn't just watched a dozen heavy ceramic gnomes vanish overnight, leaving only their hats behind. "Mrs. Ellis," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady, "did you move them? Did you put them somewhere safe?" Maybe because of the kids. Her face tightened like I'd insulted her. "I didn't touch them," she said, and the way she said it made my skin prickle. "I went to bed. They were there. I woke up. They weren't." I looked again at the bare earth, at the hats. I thought about the gnome in the street, the missing hat, the way the others had lined up to watch. I thought about the triangle of gazing balls, the smashed pieces, the neat little bandage painted with so much care. I thought about the way nobody else wanted to go near this yard. My eyes went to the gazing balls without me meaning to. The glass reflected the scene, but distorted. In one of them, my face looked stretched and pale. In another, Mrs. Ellis looked smaller, bent in a way she wasn't in real life. In the third, the bare patch of earth looked darker, deeper, like a hole. I forced myself to look away. Mrs. Ellis took a shaky step forward and picked up one of the hats. She held it like she expected it to crumble, then turned it in her hands as if checking for a crack or a hidden message. "They didn't even take the hats," she whispered. "They left the hats." I didn't know what to say. There are moments where your normal neighbor voice fails you. The part of you that knows how to handle small problems, like a broken fence or a noisy dog, suddenly has nothing to grab onto. "Maybe someone stole them," I said, even though the words sounded weak the moment they left my mouth. "Maybe someone thought it was funny. Maybe they'll show up again." Mrs. Ellis let out a laugh that wasn't a laugh. It was a small, broken sound. "No," she said simply. "They're not coming back." I stared at the hats again, counting them without meaning to. 11, not 12. That missing hat from the first incident, the one that vanished from Mr. Pennyhill, wasn't among them. And that's when the idea settled in my mind in the most awful, quiet way. Whatever had been happening wasn't random. It wasn't just a prank. It was steps, a process, a group deciding something and carrying it out. The hats left behind like skins, like uniforms, like proof that what used to be here had moved on. I stood there with Mrs. Ellis, both of us staring at the empty triangle of dirt, while the morning continued around us like nothing was wrong. I wanted to believe there was a normal explanation. I wanted to believe the gnomes were in someone's garage waiting to be returned. I wanted to believe the kids would laugh and admit it. But as the sun climbed and the gazing balls caught the light, I couldn't stop thinking about the way the gnomes had lined up to watch their fallen comrade. I couldn't stop thinking about that triangle, how it kept reappearing, how everything inside it kept changing, and I couldn't stop thinking about how, out of 12 gnomes, only 11 hats were left behind. Like one of them had been chosen, like one of them had been promoted, like one of them didn't need a hat anymore.